Welcome, Pewter Report readers, viewers, and listeners to a brand new edition of the Pewter Report podcast, Energized by Celsius. It is a very exciting show because it is a Wednesday show, which means we are previewing the Bucs' next game. And this week is even more special because it's a playoff game, baby.
That's right.
The Bucs have advanced to the playoffs.
Rick Zois in the house.
They are hosting a game. We are lucky enough to have Rick Zois on the show again, a Cowboys aficionado and a football insider. Rick joined us for the Week 1 matchup when the Bucs played against the Cowboys, and we are lucky enough to have Rick on the show again. I'm your host, Matt Matera, and joined with me is the face that runs the place at pewterreport.com, SR Scott Reynolds. But we'll start with Rick. Thank you so much for joining the show, and how are you
doing? Rick.
Howdy.
Howdy, boys. Just in case we needed any clarity on which side of the fence I'm on here.
Right. Yep. And just so we introduce Rick properly, Rick was my best man at my wedding and a very good friend of mine for, over a decade now, I think, around a decade. And we coached Pop Warner.
You're
together.
aging us.
Yeah, I am. Yeah. You have a hat that you're going to wear. I was going to bring back a little trip down memory lane with my hat.
South Pasco
Predators. Yeah, there we go. So.
Well represented in the college football postseason at the D1 level this year. So that was exciting and fun.
Very, very cool to see Wade Woodaz and all the guys doing their thing.
RJ
Garcia from Kansas State. Yeah, it's crazy to see how these kids have grown up. It really is. And these Buccaneers and Cowboys have grown up since Week 1 to a degree.
I was
a little bit
matured in some ways. I did have one other prop that I needed to show you, Scott, before we go too far. It is a real school, so there you go.
My brother went there for a year.
Oh my gosh!
Familiar with High Point as well. My brother went there for a year. Then he transferred out, but it is a real school. He did go there
7 or 8 years. No.
So the inside joke there is Rick, who played defensive back. You're a DB at heart, cornerback. He always told me that he went to High Point University, and I always thought that was a joke because he would go up and high point the ball, getting some interceptions.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I received a flyer in the mail from High Point University that it was an actual real thing. And I called you, dude, you weren't kidding. There's actually a High Point University. So that was funny. Good stuff. Well, speaking of high pointing things, we're going to high point this Bucs Cowboys playoff game like nobody else's business. We've really been studying this matchup. It's great that we've had a couple of games now, both of which have gone the Buccaneers' way, a 31-29 win and opening day back in 2021, and then opening day win again for Tampa Bay in Dallas, 19-3. And that game was a bit of an anomaly because the Buccaneers ran the ball really, really well that day and have not done that since. They're actually the worst team in the league when it comes to running the ball. But every dog has its day. Every blind squirrel can find the nut sometimes. And Leonard Fournette had a 100-yard day, and that was a really unique day for the Buccaneers. And winning that game, we saw the return of Chris Godwin. We saw the early exits of Donovan Smith, who got injured in that game. Micah Parsons beat him for a sack, and that really kind of was the continuation of the Buccaneers' aches and pains along the offensive line that started in training camp with Ryan Jensen, our starting center, went out in the second training camp practice. And then Aaron Stinney, who was a starter at guard during the Super Bowl year, he went out, and Donovan Smith goes out, and just kind of been a little bit of a topsy-turvy offensive line situation. And now the Buccaneers have got their starting center, Robert Hainsey, who exited the Week 18 matchup against the Falcons with a hamstring injury. So he's a little bit questionable right now. But Smith and Tristan Wirfs are going to be back in action. So let's start with the Buccaneers offense and how that matches up with this Dallas defense, Rick, because Tom Brady's had to throw the ball an awful lot this year. They tried to run the ball. He wasn't really leaned on too much in that Week 1 matchup, but they've had to lean on Tom ever since. We saw the fourth quarter comebacks against the Rams, the Saints, the Cardinals on Christmas night, the Panthers. And, when you've got a team that's very one-dimensional, they'll try to run the ball, but without much success. What does Dan Quinn do, and what does this Dallas defense do to try to stymie Tom Brady this time around?
So, you and I talked about a little bit about this earlier. The one thing that I would say is, yes, run numbers haven't been great for you guys, but I think you guys supplement that really nicely with the quick passing game and then also the outlets and the screens. So Dan has not been playing a ton of press, particularly since Anthony Brown got injured. And we've kind of gone through some rotations there to figure out who we can add into the mix with Ron Bland, who's had a really good season. And I think I actually mentioned him on our very first podcast that I was excited to see him because we weren't sure if Jordan Lewis was going to start the season. But that other corner spot outside of Diggs and Bland, they've been rotating through some guys the last couple of weeks to try to figure out what the best combo is.
Right.
You guys get the ball out. Brady gets the ball out very quickly. I think you guys are top in the league in sack percentage. Offensively, not allowing sacks, and you're third in best interception rate. So he gets the ball out quickly and efficiently. The mantra or the approach that Quinn is kind of taken is, hey, bend but don't break, keep everything in front of you. That's not going to work. I think he's going to have to press to help take away some of those quick passes and to be able to get up and defend those screens and the outlets to the running back.
So let me ask you this question here, just a good one from Mark Fisher. You and I were talking about this a little bit, Rick, before. Have you ever had a playoff game where you have no idea what to expect from either team, right? And when it comes to the Bucs offense, and we'll talk about the Cowboys offense in a little bit here, but the Bucs offense is just, they've struggled to score points. They scored 30 points against the Panthers. I think the highest they scored this year is 31 and a 41-31 loss back in week 4 to the Chiefs. But even in that Carolina game, everything that has bothered the Bucs that they've struggled with this year, poor red zone efficiency, poor third down conversion rate. They can't run the ball. They had 67 yards against the Panthers. The only difference in that game was hitting the 3 deep shots to Mike Evans, a 63-yarder, 57-yarder, and a 30-yarder. And we've seen Mike feast when teams will play him in man coverage, and that also includes cover 1, cover 3 with a single high safety. How much will Dan Quinn try to take away Mike Evans with cover 2 or quarters or doing something where the safeties are back and helping over the top?
I think what you're going to see is you're going to see a lot of digs on Evans because they're going to have to give safety help to whoever that other corner is. They're also going to need to play those. He's going to want to play those safeties up in that short middle of the field where Brady loves to attack to help with that. So I think they're going to go, Diggs has traveled on a lot of receivers this year. It's not, they don't always do it, but when they feel it's favorable, they do it. I think you're going to see Diggs there. And I think the safety help's going to have to go to the other side and also coming up and helping with Godwin engage underneath. So that's what I think you'll see there. I think you're going to see a lot of Evans and Diggs one-on-one. I thought Diggs played well against Evans week 1. There was that fade in the end zone, which we can debate whether that was OPI or not. But yeah, I thought he played well against them. So I think at this point that's a matchup they feel good about, and they're going to try to help in the other areas.
Yeah, I wanted to ask about both corners because Diggs is obviously a very exciting player. We all know what he did last season with the number of interceptions. And while he is obviously very aggressive, that's how you get that high number like he did, he's obviously very susceptible as well to get beat deep because he's going to take that chance and try to make the big play. And because of that, he'll get burned. And Mike Evans, he asked for it all the time. He even said it today when we spoke to him. I hope I get one-on-one coverage. I hope I don't get safety help. But it sounds like, as you said, that the Cowboys are very confident in that. And then on the flip side, with Ron Bland, he's a rookie that leads the Cowboys in interceptions. So, what have you seen from him this year? And how great has that been for the Cowboys? Because, the draft can be a crapshoot. You bring in a rookie. You never expect the guy to explode onto the scene. But leading the team in interceptions obviously goes a long way.
Yeah, 5th-round rookie at that. So he's been a blessing. Had Anthony Brown not went out, I think this would have been a really solid rotation at cornerback. Or had Jordan Lewis not went out, if you would have had any combination of the 3 of those, would have been a really good situation. Diggs has gotten beat. He is aggressive. He's been much better at it this year as far as not biting. He has had some instances, but he's been much more disciplined about it. But he's aggressive, and you want that out of a corner. At least I would. I'll take that.
Right.
Bland is he's really savvy for a rookie, and the thing that I love about him is he plays the ball really well in the air. If you watch some of the picks that he's had, they're not just getting thrown to him. He's making a play on the ball. He's getting his hands in there with the receiver's hands. He comes away with a lot. There's a lot of times where he'll be in zone and he'll just drop out. He'll read a route in front of him that somebody else has, and he'll drop into that zone and cut that lane off. So he's very savvy.
So what you're saying is he's enrolled in High Point University, right?
He is enrolled in High Point University. I think depending on how they're going to be able to match him up with Godwin, I think they're probably going to want to bracket Godwin. But I think he's a good matchup with Godwin. The question there then is, okay, what about Gage and Julio Jones? How are you going to match up with those?
Yeah, and with Julio Jones, he had a big game coming out party, if you will, for Tampa Bay in that season opener. Caught a deep ball, had a nice end around for a first down, but he also got hurt in that game, and he hurt his knee, and really, maybe the exception of the Seahawks game, hasn't really delivered a lot. I mean, I don't say he's washed. I've got some respect for Julio Jones, but he's just not the same player for sure. And I don't think he's had the impact because of that injury in week one that the Buccaneers expected. At the same time, we've heard from Byron Leftwich. We've heard from Tom Brady on his podcast. This is a much healthier Buccaneer team than it has been in recent weeks. And Julio is one of those players that sat out last week along with Tristan Wirfs and Donovan Smith. So they feel like they're getting guys back, and we'll talk about this in a little bit, but Vita is one of those other guys too that sat out with a calf injury that they're expecting to rejoin the fold. Carlton Davis is another player that missed last week. So they're expecting a lot of these Buccaneer players, and Julio's one of them, to be back in action. And really for the first time, Matt, since week one, and you asked Byron Leftwich about this today, it seems like, with Chris Godwin playing way better now than he did in week one, where he kind of made his miraculous comeback in quick fashion from that torn ACL, they'll really have a full complement of wide receivers, probably as healthy as they've been, with Evans, Godwin, Julio, Russell Gage. I mean, it seems that they'll have their full arsenal for the first time in some time.
That's right. It feels like first time, long time that they're going to have the I don't want to say the core four because they haven't lived up to a nickname deserving of core four that's usually set aside for historic units and groups. But yeah, I think there's a reason why you hear some rumblings. Now, a lot of it's coming from Tampa Bay players and Tampa Bay media that Chris Godwin should be considered for comeback player of the year. He's probably not going to win it because of like Geno Smith and Saquon Barkley. Yeah. But, I mean, Chris Godwin, week one, let's remember, Byron Leftwich actually mentioned this too, so shout out to Byron for getting something right. Chris Godwin got hurt in that game against the Cowboys too. So we're talking about, okay, you saw a little bit of Chris Godwin, but we didn't fully see how the Cowboys could totally game plan for them. And to Rick, what you were talking about before with Cowboys want to keep everything off, maybe not press the line of scrimmage. If everyone remembers that first play of the game, and they designed it this way specifically before they even got to Dallas, was one of those swing passes, a screen pass to Chris Godwin that he went up the field. Went up the field for a first down. So obviously you're going to see a much healthier Chris Godwin, 100 receptions, over 1,000 yards. My hat's off to him for everything that he's done this season. And Russell, I don't know exactly what the Bucs are going to get from Julio Jones, just because that injury can flare up at any moment, and it has reared its ugly head at times. So, like, you can go to the Seattle game. Yeah, that was a great game, but Julio Jones caught the ball in stride. There wasn't a Seahawk within 10 yards of him when he scored the touchdown. I don't know if that's like a great groundbreaking play by Julio Jones, but Russell Gage, I will say, the last couple of weeks, he's not getting the crazy chunk plays that we all expected him to get. So there's definitely room for improvement in that area. But he's become Mr. Red Zone. And third and
5 touchdowns.
Down. Exactly. So he's getting it done in the important areas where the Bucs have struggled all year long is the red zone and third and fourth down. But the one guy that's been getting it done has been Russell Gage.
And going back, Rick, to that first game, the Buccaneers' red zone problems really flared up at that point in time, right? I mean, it was a field goal fest outside of the touchdown pass to Mike Evans, that fade route. And is that an area that Dallas has continued to have success in, or was that just the Buccaneers' offense just bogging down in the red zone, and that kind of became commonplace in Tampa? But how much of that is attributed to what Dallas has done in the red zone? Have they been
we've been good in the red zone. We have. Even last week against Washington, we turned the ball over, and they were starting inside their 25 twice.
Yeah.
We do pretty well at holding it to field goals there. I think one of the things that I noticed is, and you and I talked a little bit about this earlier, Scott, is with the lack of the actual rushing attack and using those swing passes. When you get in the red zone, that tends to bog down a little bit because the field shrinks a little bit. So I think that's one of the things. One of the interesting things, and Matt, I wanted to go back to, you were touching on Russell Gage and Julio Jones. And I think some of the personnel groupings are going to be really interesting here. So we're talking about Deron Bland. They will sometimes, they'll keep him as the outside corner if say a team goes in 12 personnel, which I know the Bucs don't run a lot out of. So one running back and 2 tight ends. They'll keep him outside, and sometimes they'll use a 3 safety nickel look where they'll bring Jerron Kearse down in the slot. When there's 3 wides on the field, they'll kick Deron Bland inside and into the slot where he can play both, but they'll kick him into the slot. And then I'm guessing, and they've been kind of quiet about what they're going to do, but I think you'll see Nashawn Wright outside, and then there are rumblings that you may see some Xavier Rhodes out there, who we just picked up and hasn't seen any action with us yet. Right. But maybe he's slowed down a bit, but maybe he's a good matchup for Julio Jones at this point. Those two veterans can go at it.
Yeah, I get a funny feeling we're gonna see, because of Julio and Russell Gage's health, I think we're gonna see a little bit more 4 wide. And it all depends on how they can block Micah Parsons. We'll get into Micah in a minute, but Rick, the next question I have for you is, let's say you're feeling a little sluggish. Let's say you wanted to have an energy drink to, give you a little pep in your step. What energy drink would you be drinking? Oh, it's a Celsius.
Just happen to have one here.
Just happen to have one there. Yeah. See, it's Celsius, folks. It's not just a Florida thing. Rick lives in Tennessee. It's nationwide. And if you want to try Celsius, and they've got some amazing new flavors out. We teased one on social media. It's called Fantasy Vibe. It's the latest vibe. Of course, you have the Arctic, the tropical, and the peach vibe. The Fantasy Vibe is mandarin orange and marshmallow, and I can't wait to try it because it sounds awesome. Orange is one of my absolute favorites. Is that what you're drinking today, Rick? You drinking an orange?
It's orange.
There you go. See, now we're talking. So if you want to find out, like, let's say you live in Tennessee, like Rick does, where can I get Celsius? Go to Celsius.com, click on the store locator, and you'll see all these health and nutrition stores, these convenience stores, these bodegas, these grocery stores pop up where you can buy Celsius around you. Then go grab a couple cans. And then once you find your favorite flavors, go to Amazon, buy them in bulk, and use the subscribe and save option. That way you can save some money to ship them right to your door, and you can set the delivery methods where you can have a case of Celsius sent to you every week, 2 weeks, every other month, however you want it. It's going to come right to you. There's a bunch of flavors. The best part about Celsius, aside from the amazing flavors and the taste of it, is the fact that it's the healthiest energy drink you're going to find. 7 essential vitamins, including vitamin B3, which helps give you that pep in your step. And there's no sugar and there's no preservatives. That means no sugar crash later on. Why would you want an energy drink to give you a rush of energy and then have you crash later on? That's why Celsius is the best, folks. Make sure you go to Celsius.com or go to Amazon, buy them in bulk with the subscribe and save option. Celsius, the official energy drink of Pewter Report. All right, we're back here. Let's talk about Micah Parsons, because the Buccaneers saw he was the absolute game wrecker, right? This was a player that had 2 sacks in that first game, and also took out Donovan Smith with the move. And we saw Josh Wells have to come in. Wells won't be available; he's out for the year. But Brandon Walton played pretty well. So if they do have to have their backup tackle, let's hope they don't. Brandon Walton will be that guy. But Donovan Smith versus Micah Parsons, round 2. Parsons started off the season with the bang, but that's not really what the Cowboys are getting from Micah Parsons down the stretch, right, Rick?
Not just Micah, but the pass rush in general. I think so. There's a couple of contributing factors to that. Coverage wise, Anthony Brown going out and the what we've discussed ad nauseum here with the corners, it changes a little bit of the pass rush, right? Because you get some of that from coverage where you can get there. The other thing is I'm assuming that we're going to see more of this when we get into the playoffs here this week. Dan Quinn has stopped moving Mike around as much as he was before. He used to move him all over the line. You would see A and B gap blitzes, which I think are important against Brady, obviously. Get that midline pressure so he can't step up. But he's been relatively stationary at right defensive end for the last several weeks. And you're seeing, I think, the toll that it's taking on his body. Now, he's a tremendous athlete, so I'm sure he'll get it wired up for the playoffs. I said I hope they move him around more. But that it's much easier to game plan for somebody, any great defender, when you know where they're going to be. Yeah. And I can chip with a back, I can double with a tight end. So there's a lot of that's been going on, and you can see the toll that is taken on him. But we've got some folks coming back this week on defense, particularly Leighton Vander Esch. Yeah. I think that's going to make a difference. Chauncey Golston's been coming on for us last couple of weeks. They're playing him at D tackle now. He's a converted defensive end.
I liked him at Iowa. I thought he was a pretty good player.
He was good at Iowa. He put on 25 pounds in the offseason, and the last couple of weeks he had a really good game in the run game against the Commanders. Or the Commodes, as you like to call them, Scott. You won't get any argument out of me from that. Sam Williams is another one. Now,
interesting news today with Sam Williams.
Interesting news. He was involved in a car accident a few weeks ago and missed a game because of concussion from the car accident. And there was a warrant issued for him today for reckless driving. So we'll see how that plays out. But he is somebody where I think they can use him at defensive end and let Micah move around a little bit more.
Yeah. Well, when you look at Sam Williams too, 4 sacks, your second leading sacker, Micah has 13.5. But the interesting thing about Dorrance Armstrong, who went to KU, so that automatically makes him a bad player. But the thing with Micah Parsons though is we talked about the drop off in sacks. He's got a sack and a half over the last 6 games. And Rick, before we switch to the Cowboys offense and the Bucs defense, and we'll talk a little bit too about about the schedule for the Cowboys here. The playoffs, as you know, are typically about 2 things: health and momentum. Right? Do you have momentum heading into the playoffs, and are you a healthy team? Teams that have momentum and health, and we saw that with the Buccaneers in 2020. They were the healthiest team heading into the postseason. They lost their starting right guard, Alex Kappa, to a broken leg in the Washington game, their first wild card game. Otherwise, all of their starters suited up for the Super Bowl, right? And they won 8 straight games. So that's where the health and momentum come into play. If you look at the Cowboys, they are 3-2 in their last 5 games. Those wins came against the likes of the Houston Texans, 27-23, which is a kind of a last-minute furious comeback, a bad loss in overtime to Jacksonville, and then you've got an inspired win over a Gardner Minshew-led Eagles team, 40-34. That's probably the best win you've had down the stretch here. A 27-13 win on Thursday night against a team in Tennessee that's in a downward spiral, and then a really bad loss, 26-6 to the Tennessee Titans. So what's happened over the last 5 weeks? The Cowboys were kind of in it for a minute in the NFC East race. The Eagles won that in Week 18, but does this Cowboys team have some momentum or not?
So the one thing I would say is we're 5-2, maybe 5-3 against playoff teams heading into the playoffs, and I think you guys are 2-4 against playoff teams. So I think that's something to fall back on. You never want to take a loss like we did at Washington, right? Yeah, not good. I will put a counter argument out there to that as far as trying to find a silver lining or half full. A lot of those games that you've won, as far as like going against Houston, who did play Kansas City tough. And I think took them to overtime, right?
The fighting Lovie Smiths.
We've won a lot of those games where they weren't the cleanest games. I kind of feel better that what happened last week happened because it's a wake-up call.
Mm-hmm.
I think if they would have continued just squeaking by, feeling yourself, smelling yourself, as they say,
right,
going into the playoffs with squeaking by and what I'll call a sloppy win.
Yeah,
I don't know that helps you. Now, we did last year. We blew the Eagles out. I think we scored 51 or 46 points the last game of the season. Then we got bounced by the 49ers. So
yeah.
I'm going to say that this serves as a wake-up call for this team.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking that too. We were doing the Pewter post-game show because the Bucs had played earlier, but we had the game on the side as well. And I was thinking to myself, like, this is not great for the Bucs that the Cowboys are playing so bad, because once the playoffs get there, and obviously, you correct yourself and your focus is even better than it really was before. And the Cowboys proved that, in a big moment, at least in this season, because we know how the Cowboys have choked in the past, no offense, but they had a big game this year against the Minnesota Vikings. And, we can say maybe the Vikings aren't as great as their record is.
Best game of the season.
They smoked the Vikings. Like, it wasn't even close. They changed the game in the third quarter. They changed the game to another game in the third quarter. It was that much of a blowout. So the Cowboys clearly have it in them in a big game and a road game nonetheless.
Well, one thing I would point to is they haven't lost back-to-back games all season.
Mm-hmm.
That's important.
Yeah, that is. Rick, real quick before we switch to the offensive side for the Cowboys versus the Bucs defense, when you look at this game, what does if Tampa Bay's going to win the game, what has to work well offensively for them to, aside from score one more point than the Cowboys, but what does the Bucs offense have to do well against the Cowboys to score 19 points or more and get a win over Dallas on Monday night?
Obviously, don't turn it over, right? I think Godwin's had some fumbling issues here.
Back-to-back games, yeah.
But, as with really any game, I think it comes down to that offensive line. If you can, you're going to have to protect Brady, and you're going to have to allow him to get the ball out. That's the key for me. And I've said that all week for the Cowboys defense. That is going to be the key, is the pass rush has to return to form, and that's going to be the key for us on defensively.
Right. Let's take a look now at you're talking about pass rush and offensive line. The last time these two teams played, the Cowboys suffered a very surprising injury in training camp to their Pro Bowl left tackle, and that didn't start their season on a high note, although they kind of recovered. And we saw your rookie first round pick step in at left tackle, and I thought he actually fared pretty well. The Buccaneers got to Dak Prescott a couple of times. Matter of fact, Shaq Barrett, who's not going to be playing in this game because he tore his Achilles tendon against the Ravens on Thursday night. But you go back to that week 1 game, and interestingly enough, he actually knocked Dak Prescott out of the game in the fourth quarter, and we saw Cooper Rush come in, and he had to quarterback this team for several weeks and actually proved to be a winner. And, so the season wasn't over just because Dak Prescott was out. But Tampa Bay's defensive line, their defensive front with some of those Todd Bowles blitzes did put some pressure on Dak Prescott. I think they scored on their opening drive a field goal and then 10 straight possessions without any points.
Yeah, so you guys always, I don't know what it is with the Bucs, but you always seem to draw our offensive line when it's compromised. So I think last year, Zach Martin was out week 1, as you mentioned this year, Scott. And then here we are this year. Right now, our center Tyler Biadasz has been out for the last game and a half. Should be back this week, which is huge. And then we lost at the Houston game. We lost our starting right tackle Terrence Steele.
Right.
So that's where Tyron Smith is playing now over there at right tackle, which he played his rookie year here and also when he was at USC in college.
So is it safe to say that the Cowboys' offensive line, similar to Tampa Bay's, is in better shape heading into this week than maybe it has in a couple weeks?
I mean, we're not replacing Terrence Steele. It's never obviously a bad thing to have Tyron Smith come in for him. He's a little older now. Hasn't played right tackle in a while. What I've seen in the run game, his pass pro is still very good.
Right.
In the run game, and he's playing, you've got 2 potential Hall of Famers there, and him and Zach Martin on the right side of the line, still working through getting used to some of those reach blocks and some of the zone schemes on that right side. And then also an interesting thing is just seeing the communication between him and Zach Martin develop as far as how they're attacking combo blocks and getting up to the second level. So yeah, we're there, and then we'll have our center back, and Jason Peters will go back to more of a swing tackle role. So I think it's as healthy as we're going to be at this point, short of the folks that are out for the season.
Yeah.
It's really interesting going into, you're talking about the run game. The Cowboys, obviously, they got the two running back situation going with Tony Pollard and Zeke. And the Bucs, in terms of stopping the run on defense, it's quite interesting because at the beginning of the year, they got absolutely gashed at times. And, we have come to learn that it's really the case of if Vita Vea and Akeem Hicks are in together, the Bucs, I won't say look like the run-stopping defense from last season and the year before, where you'd be lucky if you got 3 or 4 yards against them, but clearly way better. But if you only have Vita Vea or Akeem Hicks, only one of them in, the Bucs will allow 100, 120 plus per game. So how do you see this matchup going with the Bucs defensive line? We can include the linebackers as well, going up against the Cowboys offensive line and the combo of Zeke and Tony Pollard.
Yeah, so I've noticed that. It was one of my observations with Vita, Vita and Hicks, right? When they're on the field at the same time, much different than if they're out there. So I think it's a great matchup for, as far as if you're a fan of football, I think it's a great matchup. You're going to see them try to establish the run. They have to do it. I'd like to see a little bit of a more variety on first down. We're the highest run team as far as first down run percentage in the league.
Tampa's got to be second.
and we are, well,
Tampa's got to be number 2.
And maybe similar to that, Scott, is we're also near the bottom of the league in yards per carry on first down. So I think that has got to get established to keep them on schedule so that, we're not getting in third and long. And we've got to take some pressure off of Dak so that he's not having the feeling like he has to press to move the offense. Once they get in a rhythm with the run game between Pollard and Zeke, it's a tough offense to deal with.
Yeah, Rick, we got some fan questions here. Let's get to some of these directed to you. I saw one of them here. That was, has Lavonte Turpin done anything for Dallas this season as a kick return or punt return guy? He lit it up in the preseason.
He was just named an All-Pro today. So, but with that said, he hasn't scored. We talked, I think the last time we talked, he had just come off that preseason game where he had a kick and a punt return for a touchdown. He hasn't done that, but what he has done, short of the turnovers last week, he has moved field position for us better than we've had it at a returner in a while, where you either have to kick away from him if he gets it. He's been flipping field position for us to an extent, nothing drastic, but he's been effective there. But we can discuss whether he's an All-Pro or Pro Bowl selection. But hey, they selected him, so good for him. I mean, kid coming in out of the USFL, so it's a great story.
We've had a couple of comments here about Ezekiel Elliott and Tony Pollard. Which running back is better, is more dangerous? Which one's the better pass protector? And we know Pollard catches the ball really, really well out of the backfield, but as it stands right now, who's the better running back? If you're Mike McCarthy, who are you using as your bell cow this game?
So I view them, and I think, and this may sound odd, and I think the Cowboys do too. They view them as one running back. It's one running game, and they'll use whichever combo they have to, depending on what's working, what they're trying to do. If I've got to hang my hat on somebody, it's Tony Pollard at this point because he's so explosive. But you get me down in the red zone or short yardage situation, I want Zeke in there. Zeke is much better at pass pro. It's one of the underrated parts of a running back game is their pass protection. Zeke's phenomenal at it. So I think it's the combination of the both of the two. One thing that I will say is against. So week one, and certainly that was several weeks ago, and Zeke's got some mileage on him at this point, and we're late in the season. but he was the more effective runner against you. And he tends to be a little more effective than Pollard when you start looking at the type of defensive lines that like Tampa has.
The bigger physical lines, right? Like he's kind of a ground and pound guy, where Pollard is a little bit of a slasher and can take advantage of lighter defensive lines that maybe, have a little bit more room to wiggle, right?
Yeah, and I mean, getting I think an interesting matchup is if getting Pollard in space or to the edges against your linebackers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Here's another one from Harvinder. We appreciate the questions here. Rick, do you think the Cowboys are playing scared? Coaching scared of your coaches, scared of being fired, players scared of being traded, and it's kind of funny, right? Because there's the Sean Payton,
lingering
hey, Sean Payton out there,
Texas connection.
Yeah, and Jerry Jones, he'll put heat on any coach, right? Just ask Jason Garrett. So is Mike McCarthy, despite 12 wins, is he worried that if he's one and done this year, that he could be Black Tuesday'd?
I hope that's not on his mind. I don't think they're playing scared. I really don't think they're playing scared. Honestly, I think there could be some benefit from a kind of the old Bill Parcells mentality, where he's bringing free agents in at the end of practice for the other players to see it, who he's working out at their position. So I would say, they're not scared. I don't think McCarthy's concerned with that. He's a very focused guy. He seems to be very good at blocking out the noise, and certainly having this being his third year in Dallas, he knows what he's got to deal with there. The Sean Payton thing is out there. He and Jerry are close. He's still, his family still lives in Dallas. If you look at their records, he and McCarthy have virtually identical career records. So people have their thoughts on which is better and why. The one thing, just talking about that because it's out there, the one thing that there's obviously a compensation to get Peyton out of contract with New Orleans if you want to go that route. The other thing is he wants full control of personnel and everything. That doesn't really match with what Dallas does. They haven't had that since Jimmy obviously was that way. Had it with Bill Parcells, and it hasn't been that way since. So I don't think they're scared. And if there is that thought, then I hope that you use it as a motivator. So there's one way to address it. You go out and win.
Another question here from Harvinder. Oh, go ahead, man.
Oh, sure. Go. I was going to say, if Bucs fans do think that the Cowboys are coaching scared, you think the Bucs are going to win, you might want to bet on them over at MyBookie.
Did we lose Matt there?
Am I
here?
There
you go. We got you, Matt.
Okay.
Here you know. Yep.
Back to MyBookie. It's a new year, so give yourself a fresh start with MyBookie. Whether you bet to earn or make games more exciting, MyBookie gives you the most of your money with their redesigned deposit bonus. Just use a promo code Pewter, Pewter, on a deposit of $50 or more to receive a cash bonus instantly to your MyBookie account. Using this bonus is simple. Bet your deposit amount just once, and you're ready to cash out. It's no strings attached with MyBookie. Bet on the NFL, UFC, play for a share of big cash prizes in the weekly online blackjack tournaments. With so many brands to choose from, you need a platform that makes it simple to bet and win like MyBookie. Bet anything, anytime, anywhere with MyBookie.ag.
So I was going to put this question up here from Harvinder, and it was about, what are your thoughts, Rick, on Dallas having issues playing on real grass? I didn't see the statistic until this week, but I guess the Cowboys struggle playing on grass for away games.
Apparently so. I don't put much stock in that. It's out there. It is what it is. I don't know that there's any type of correlation to it. Certainly, you're going to play a little bit faster on turf, and you build your team for what you have on your home field. But I don't see that as anything that's like, oh, this is a big problem and we can't play on grass. I mean, Scott, you've been covering, and Matt, you guys have been covering it, and it's been all over. So I've certainly heard it. I mean, what are your thoughts on that? I mean, you look at a team like the greatest show on turf, the old Rams, right? They were much different on turf than they were. I don't think this Cowboys team is built to that extent. to be a turf exclusive team.
Right.
Again, at the press conference today, Larry Foote, the Bucs co-defensive coordinator, got asked about it. So did Lavonte David and Mike Evans. I'm thinking, we're here to talk about Bucs Cowboys playoff, and a grass conversation came up to the point that we were talking about the freaking Germany game, excuse me, from a couple of weeks ago. And I'm like, why are we talking about the grass of the Germany game? They're not playing over there. They're playing in Tampa. So I don't know. Maybe we'll see the Bucs grow the grass a little bit taller this week to slow down the likes of Tony Pollard and CD Lamb. I don't put too much stock into it. I just think the Cowboys played poorly, obviously against Washington last week, which wants me to bring up the play of Dak Prescott as well. Curious to get your thoughts about that. Because, again, we were doing the Pewter post-game show, and the interception that Dak threw, he threw a pass to the right side maybe one or two plays before. Again, I had it out of the corner of my eye. So when he threw the interception on the same exact play, I was like, wait, are they showing a replay? Did I miss something? So, Dak's thrown multiple interceptions in multiple weeks, not 2 interceptions every single time. I think the Tennessee one gets overblown because the receiver dropped it and it was picked off there. But how would you make of the play of Dak Prescott over, the last month or so?
Yeah. So he's probably throughout the season, he's had 5 or 6 of his interceptions where they weren't fully on him. And I'm not excusing turnovers. But the reality is he's had some drops. He's had some receivers that have bailed on routes on him or not run the right route or read the same thing. He tips off of hands. If you go back to the Jacksonville game, Noah Brown, right in his hands, and it goes right to Rashawn Jenkins. He, outside of those, there are times when I think he gets a little more aggressive than he traditionally has been. And I think that's, Dak doesn't want to ever give up on a play. He doesn't throw the ball away a whole lot, doesn't like to take sacks. And sometimes that's a good thing. Sometimes that you press a little bit and you try to squeeze some things in where you shouldn't. So, to that point, your point about the Washington game, he went to Noah Brown on that right side, and the very next play came back to it.
Yeah.
It was not to get too in the weeds here, but it was cover 2. So you've got you're going to have a corner up pressing. It was 3rd and 5, and it's a speed out. You're going to have a corner there. You can never leave that ball to the inside. And he did. Press conference after every game says he's going to learn from it and correct it. So we'll see. But this is playoff time, and you can't turn the ball over.
Yeah, the interesting thing about Prescott, and why the Cowboys maybe aren't playing with a ton of momentum down the stretch here, is he's thrown an interception in the last 7 games. Again, not all his fault, but that's quite the streak. And in 4 of those games, he's thrown a pair of interceptions. And so in 12 games that he's been healthy for this year, Rick, he's thrown 15 interceptions. One of those was to Antoine Winfield back in week 1. That was the lone interception that he threw against Tampa Bay there. Winfield's had a really good year when healthy. So it's going to be interesting to see how, Brady went through a stretch too, where he threw a pair of interceptions in 3 straight games. They were able to overcome 2 of those in the Cardinals game. But then when he goes interception free, as he has over the past 2 weeks, this offense puts up some points, 30 points. And the win over Carolina to win the NFC South, 17 points at the first half of Week 18 before he was pulled. So it's really going to come down to, can Dak Prescott protect the ball, right?
I think, and I'll go a little bit deeper than that, and I think this also has a lot to do with the interceptions you've seen this year. Certainly, some of those are on him, where it's a bad throw or didn't quite read the coverage right and went somewhere he shouldn't with the ball. I think the underlying issue is, outside of CD Lamb, Michael Gallup and Noah Brown are not very good route runners, and they're not going to create space for themselves. They don't separate real well. We've got one of the lowest wide receiver separation percentages in the league, and so a lot of times he's got to throw in the tight windows because his receivers. And some of that, this is a deeper discussion, but some of that is scheme, where you're counting on receivers Michael Gallup, and Noah Brown, who realistically are wide receiver 3 and 4, not 2 and 3, should be.
Right.
So you're counting on them in this scheme that we run that is a variant of the Air Coryell offense.
Mm-hmm.
You're counting on the receivers to win one-on-one matchups versus some of these, if you look at like a McVay or what Andy Reid does, where you're able to, when your guys are not winning their routes one-on-one, you're able to scheme things open and create some separation. And I think Dak is paying the price for that with these interceptions because he's got a lot of tight windows he's got to throw in. And that's why you heard all the talk about bringing in Odell Beckham. And that's why they ended up signing T.Y.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, too, when you go back and look at that 31-29 game that was a nail-biter to start the 2021 season, they're dealing with Amari Cooper that game, plus CeeDee Lamb. It just was a much more varied offensive attack. Michael Gallup in there as well. And now it just seems like if you can put the screws on CeeDee Lamb and not let him have a 120-yard game, maybe keep him 75 yards, right? Kind of contain him rather than let him go wild. You stand a pretty good chance of kind of neutralizing this Cowboys passing attack. Now, Dalton Schultz, I think, is a little bit of an underrated tight end. He's kind of hurt the Buccaneers a little bit in the past, but can Schultz step up and be maybe that de facto number 2 to help Dak Prescott in this game and take a little bit of pressure off CeeDee Lamb?
He can to move the chains. So when CeeDee's been most effective, and the crazy thing is we're having this conversation is we're top 2, I believe, right now in scoring in the league. So if we stop doing these things, imagine what it's going to look like. CeeDee's been very effective when they get him on the move and they move him around, and they're able to get him running routes from different spots, from the slot, from the outside. When he's in motion and he's on the move pre-snap, very effective. The other thing that we've had success with, and they've kind of gone away from it a little bit, and I expect that we'll probably see that this week, is our 3 tight end set, where we bring in addition to Schultz, we're bringing in Jake Ferguson and Peyton Hendershot, both rookies. That's been a very effective set for them in the passing attack. So I think you'll see some of that, and I think T.Y. Hilton is going to be, it's crazy to say this about a guy that's been there 3 weeks. Yeah. He's going to be very important to this offense in the passing game because he is a guy, he's a veteran, he's a polished route runner. He can create separation on his own, with his knowledge, with his route running, and get you when you get into these 3rd and 5 situations where they want to double CD. You've got somebody that can work underneath, work against coverage to give you another option. And then you add Schultz to that.
Yeah, Matt, it's going to be really interesting, right? Because we saw Carlton Davis, who's healthier after sitting out last week with the shoulder injury. We saw what he could do against Jamar Chase, right? Covering him all over the field. I think held him to 3 catches for 32 yards, broke up 4 passes, had an interception. And really Todd Bowles has not let Carlton Davis travel a whole bunch, right? He's basically been that starting left corner. And then when Jamel Dean's healthy, he's the starting right corner, or maybe Sean Murphy Bunting. If he's in there, he'll be at the right cornerback for Dean a little bit. But it's going to be interesting, right, to see if Carlton Davis does follow and travel with CD wherever he goes. And CD is used a lot out of the slot. So will he want to go with Antoine Winfield Jr. in the slot and continue there, or move Carlton Davis and have him follow CD wherever he goes?
Yeah, it's interesting as well, considering that Antoine Winfield Jr. last week, they assigned him to cover, 2 weeks ago, they assigned him to cover DJ Moore a little bit against the Panthers. And DJ Moore got the better of Antoine Winfield Jr. But I don't put too much stock into that. I just think it wasn't the best moments for Antoine Winfield Jr. I think Todd Bowles said it best. It's like, you're on the field for 60 plays. You may play well for 56 of them, but there's 4 plays that everyone notices, and that's what kind of gets the headlines. But to your point about Carlton Davis, it's surprising that they don't move him around more, because it's one thing if you can go from sideline to sideline and go from the left to the right side of the field. It's another when you can do it very, very well, and that's what Carlton Davis does. He's a physical corner, and he's the type of player that just loves going up against the best of the best. And I know every player will say that, but not every player acts that way when you finally get onto the field. Carlton Davis has shown it with DeAndre Hopkins years ago. DeAndre Hopkins again on Christmas night. The Jamar Chase game, as you brought it up, Carlton lives for these moments. And I think, again, it's a playoff game. It's win or go home. You have to exhaust all of your options. I don't see why they wouldn't put Carlton Davis on CeeDee Lamb. I don't want to keep quoting Byron Leftwich, but you want to put good on good, and you want to put Carlton Davis in that situation.
It's a varsity game. Yep, varsity football.
It's a very varsity game.
Question for you guys. So, how do you guys feel? How is Carlton Davis in the slot? Are you confident with him there?
I don't think he's played historically. Very well in the slot. He's a better outside.
I was kind of hoping he would follow CD and he'd go in the slot with him.
Yeah. Now, it's not to say Todd Bowles is not going to try to use him there, but the advantage of having Winfield in the slot is Winfield's a very good blitzer, and so you'll see some of those blitzes. I think they even had one against Dak where he applied some pressure from there. So that's where Winfield excels, not just covering receivers, but also blitzing from the slot. And one of the things that I think we do exceptionally well, and one area where we excel is with our Pewter Game Day show. And we've got a big game coming up here. Obviously, Monday night, we're going to have our live tailgate show at the Walk-Ons in Midtown starting at 6 o'clock. And then we've got live in-game analysis with Matt Matera at 8:15. That's the kickoff time. So Pewter Game Day, you want to be here for that Monday, 8:15, live in-game analysis. It's the Celsius Pewter Report tailgate show, and that does happen. It's presented by Rejuvenation at Walk-Ons, and that Walk-Ons location is right here, folks. It's the Midtown Tampa location, so make sure that you join us there. Midtown or Wesley Chapel, if you want to get there to watch the game, it's the best place to go to watch games. Folks, they've got TVs galore, fantastic food, drink specials. I know on game days, they've got Miller Lite and Blue Moon specials for their pints and their big 22 ounces. So make sure that you're watching this Bucs Cowboys game at Walk-Ons before the game or during the game if you can't make it to the stadium. And again, those times are 6 o'clock at the Midtown location, Midtown Tampa, and then 8:15 we'll have Pewter Game Day, Matt Matera live in-game analysis.
So, Scott, one of the things I was real quick, a lot of folks don't realize, when you put a corner in cat coverage, right? Hey, you go follow that cat wherever he goes.
Right.
The effect in what it requires out of the other corners and in the safeties, because if Carlton Davis is following CD everywhere he goes, he has to follow him in the slot. Those are a lot of variables and adjustments that the other defensive backs have to make. So it's not always that, hey, it's not that we don't think Trayvon Diggs can cover this guy wherever he goes.
Right.
But can my other guys adjust when I've got Trayvon moving all around? And that's, that's key, especially
really
if you've got corners that you're not feeling. I mean, that's, one of the reasons I think that you'll see Xavier Rhodes this week is because of his experience.
Mm-hmm.
And, he knows, okay, here's the adjustment I have to make when he's shadowing this guy. But it does have a ripple effect throughout the secondary.
It does. That's an interesting point too, Matt, because when you have a receiver go in motion, right, from the outside to the slot, now all of a sudden it is a domino effect, right, where you've got to shuffle your secondary around, quite a bit there. So Rick, we asked you what it's going to take for the Cowboys to be successful defensively against the Buccaneers offense, aside from scoring more points than the Buccaneers, which historically has not been hard. This year, if you have 19 points, you beat the Buccaneers. That's typically what it is because they're good for about 18. But what does Dallas have to do to avoid a 19-3 loss or a 26-6 loss where they've really had their offense kind of neutered a little bit by either self-inflicted wounds or just better play on the defensive side?
Yeah, so the obvious is don't turn the ball over. That's key, and I would even say don't turn it over more than once, which never won a turnover, but I would even say don't turn it over more than once. The key for me, and this is probably cliche and very basic, is they've got to stay on schedule. That's getting the run game established and being able to get to a third and manageable. I think, and like I said earlier, we run the ball vast percentage of the time on first down.
Right.
If we can be effective at running the ball on first down and get into a second or third and manageable situation, that's going to keep Dak from pressing, and that's going to have an impact on, obviously, hey, are we going to have to look for Noah Brown here on 3rd and 8 or 3rd and 12? So to me, and it's a basic thing, but I just think they have to stay on schedule. If they can stay on schedule, I feel really confident about what the offense can do in this game.
Yeah. Matt, any other questions that you have for Rick as it pertains to this Bucs Cowboys match? It's really going to be interesting because I think both teams have not lived up to their potential on offense or defense in quite some time. And I think the Cowboys have been able to overcome some of that by getting 12 wins, right? Tampa Bay has only done it 8 times. But it will be interesting to see if both of these teams do bring their best to the table, what that score is going to be, and is it going to be, lopsided one way or the other, or is it going to be a close game? I'm really not sure. One of the questions that we had to start this podcast was from Mark Fisher, who said, isn't this just a weird playoff game when you literally don't know what other team is going to be able to do in this game?
What I want to know too, Rick, is the past couple of years, and especially since Dak has been the quarterback, the Cowboys have been perennial playoff contenders. Some would say, in the conversation for the Super Bowl. So I'm just curious, your confidence level, is it higher, lower, or about the same in this year's Cowboys team versus the Cowboys last season and the season before? Where's your confidence level with them going into this game? Or to make a run?
It's about the same going in round one. I will tell you, if they beat the Buccaneers this week, I think that's a big hump for them to get over. Mm-hmm. And I think then I'm confident that they could get on a good run. I really do. But I think, not to state the obvious, you got to get past round one. But I think the mentality of this team, and it was some of what your question you had earlier, are they playing scared, what have you? I think, Brady's 7-0 against the Cowboys.
Yeah.
Getting through this first round with a win, I think, is one of those times where that's going to propel them. And
a psychological boost.
Yeah, and I think that they're going to say, okay, it's all in front of us now. We've got this monkey off of our back, and I think they could go on a run. So I'm confident, beyond this game.
Yeah.
Once they get through round one, I think they can make a run.
Yeah. Last one for me, Mike McCarthy. What is the level of confidence that you and other Cowboy followers have in him outside looking in? And then what do you think that this team has in terms of confidence? Because he has had some questionable play clock management, game day management in the past. I don't know if that's the case this year, but certainly it's prevented the Cowboys from living up to their potential once they get to the postseason. So has he grown as a coach? Does he have more confidence from the fan base and maybe even from the team?
Yes, yeah, he does. Now, anytime you have a loss like we had against the Redskins I'm old and I grew up in the DC area, the Commodes. How fans are the community is it's all over the place. Yeah. There are people questioning it, and especially with Sean Payton being out there. He was brought here to win in January. Mm-hmm. That was, Jerry talked about his pedigree and being able to win in January. That's why he was brought here. Right. I think that if you look at what he did, 5 games without Dak, they went 4-1, 12-5. It's the first time since the mid-90s that we've had back-to-back 12-win seasons and back-to-back playoff appearances. Yeah. So I feel confident with him. I think he's a good, steady hand. We'll see what happens this week. If my feeling is, if they look like they did against the Commanders, if that is what Monday night looks like, then I think everything's on the table. If otherwise, I think he's safe. The bigger conversation, to be honest, within Dallas and amongst the fan base is the offensive coordinator position, and I think it's probably a similar conversation that you guys are hearing there in Tampa Bay.
Yeah, but what's Dallas averaging, Rick? What's your point average?
That is, and so that's the other side of the argument. So there's things that I look at in an offense, just very briefly. Points, obviously, you have to score points, and they're putting up a ton of points. But I want to see, are you able to run a 4-minute offense? Are you able to sustain drives when you need to? Are you, and this is a big one, I think you and I talked about this.
Are your wide receivers all bunched together? Right?
Yes. And the thing, and Byron Leftwich is a young coordinator. Kellen Moore, still a young coordinator. He's been there a few years. I mean, he came off the bench as a backup quarterback, and now he's do you have answers when the defense takes away the things that you want to do, that you want to hang your hat on?
Yeah.
When the defense takes that away, are you able to answer? Do you have a counter to that? And those things, to me, outside or in conjunction with scoring points, those things are important when you talk about, is this a good offense, and is this a good offensive coordinator?
And so I guess your answer to that, Kellen Moore is not creative, doesn't really have the plan B, doesn't really have that backup plan when the original game plan isn't working.
That's my feeling, and I think he's gotten a little bit better at it, because of Mike McCarthy being there. And you've seen some things that have happened over the course of the year where you could tell that's not Kellen Moore, that's a Mike McCarthy, which I'd like to see more of.
And you know what? This is part of it too. Without Bruce Arians in the headset of Byron Leftwich, now granted, we talk about the Bucs having some missing pieces, right? No Pro Bowl center Ryan Jensen, no Pro Bowl left guard Ali Marpet, no Antonio Brown, no Rob Gronkowski. It's a lot of good firepower that's gone, a lot of talent that's off the field that Byron doesn't have to work with this year. And I too, it's all on his shoulders. He doesn't have that suggestion from a Bruce Arians who's in his headset a couple feet away from him on the sidelines anymore. And we've seen that in Tampa. When it's not going, when the script isn't working, there's no off script revisions. There's no plan B that is just as good. It usually is the downward spiral for the offense in those type of situations until you get to the 2-minute drive and Brady can call his own plays and take over. And then you see the Buccaneers, end up winning against the Rams, the Saints, the Cardinals, and the Panthers in harrowing fashion, because Tom has to take the game over. So,
well, it's funny you said that because there was people talking about, this is Dan Quinn against Byron Leftwich. For me, I think this is Dan Quinn against Tom Brady.
Yeah.
That's where I think that this is the strategy. And I think that's the matchup. One of the things, do we have a quick second?
We do.
Two,
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So, and the reason I want to ask you is because it's somewhat of a similar dynamic that you have there with Leftwich and Brady, right? Where they're almost contemporaries, right? Similar in age. The dynamic of that relationship with an offensive coordinator and a quarterback, when you're almost peer to peer, which I think can be good sometimes, but I also wonder, is it detrimental? And it's similar to what we have with Dak. The guy was competing for a job with Kellen Moore, 5 years ago.
Now they're working together,
and now he's your offensive coordinator. And I wonder if that dynamic doesn't come into play sometimes and affect some of the things that you're seeing on the field.
Yeah, well, it's interesting, right? We shared this a little bit on the podcast. Once Byron gets fired, I'll share more, and that could happen as soon as Tuesday if the Bucs lose. But Byron Leftwich is going to be replaced. He is, and we've talked about it multiple times in the show. We've hinted at it. We're going to write about it. It's going to happen. But the thing is when Tom Brady was recruited by Bruce Arians, he was really excited. Right? He had a relationship with Jason Light dating back to the Patriots. Here you have the quarterback whisperer. He gets on the phone with Peyton Manning. Oh my God, you're going to love Bruce, right? And so Tom gets to Tampa, and Bruce is like the most hands-off coach there is. He's riding around in the golf cart. It really shocked Brady. Yeah. It really did, because Brady thought he was going to get, the Carson Palmer treatment, the Andrew Luck treatment with working with the quarterback whisperer, and Bruce was really hands off. And I think it was a shock to his system. And so you had really Blaine Gabbert was the guy that really, he and Byron really kind of got Tom into the system and prepared. And And between those two, that really allowed Brady to have some success right out of the gate, win the Super Bowl, et cetera. It took a little while for the offense to really kind of click and gel because they didn't have a preseason because of COVID. But Brady is Brady, and he was able to do that. But as time has gone on, what I've heard is, I think there's, I don't put words in Brady's mouth, but from what I'm hearing, it's like Brady looks at Byron and says, yeah, nice guy, kind of knows football, but
I'm ready for something else.
Yeah, well, so I love a win-win situation. So I think a win-win for everybody on the screen here and listening to this is if the Panthers hire Kellen Moore, because they requested to interview him. Right. So I think that's a win-win for both organizations right now.
We almost had it with the Jaguars wanting Byron Leftwich, and that didn't happen. I think the Jags were lucky in that instance. But
now we very well could replace him with Byron Leftwich. So in that case, we're going to have an issue, and I'm going to have to call you guys offline.
It's a game of musical coordinators, and that would really be something. Really Before we wrap this show up, Scott, let's hear a message from our friends over at Age Rejuvenation.
Let's do it.
As we age, our hormones decrease, both for men and women.
I was tired all the time, had no sex drive.
I was groggy.
I felt like I was 80 years old because everything hurt.
I came to Age Rejuvenation because I was tired all the time.
Bioidentical hormones has really made such an impact in people's lives.
I actually enjoy shopping now.
Got all my energy back. Mind is sharp.
I feel like I'm 18 again.
It was perfect for me.
Get with Age Rejuvenation. Do it now. Don't wait.
Call Age Rejuvenation today.
That's right, folks. I turned 50 this year. Old man. But, I don't feel like an old man. I feel like I'm 40 years old. I feel 10 years younger. And there's John Gilmore, retired Buccaneer tight end. That's a current picture, folks. John looks great. He looks like he could still play tight end again. I know he loved that paycheck. And, how is he able to feel better and look great? And how am I able to drop some pounds and feel younger and stronger? Well, it's the testosterone therapy we get at Age Rejuvenation. What I'm asking you to do is this: go to agerejuvenation.com and click on their consultations. Get a free, no obligation consultation. Go get your labs done. Insurance will pay for it. You get your testosterone level. You get your blood work done. And if you have low testosterone, which guess what? Most men in their 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s do. It's a natural occurring event. Nothing to be ashamed of. It happens. Then get the testosterone therapy treatments. And if you mention Pewter Report, you're going to save $500 off your first treatment. It's definitely the way to go. They also have weight loss programs. If you're looking to kick off the new year with a resolution to lose some weight, they've got fantastic weight loss options as well. Go to agerejuvenation.com. Tell them Pewter Report sent you. They have 5 Tampa Bay area locations to serve you. Age Rejuvenation, the presenting sponsor of the Pewter Report Tailgate Show, which will be at the Midtown Tampa location of walk-ons, and that's going to be this Sunday before the game.
We didn't even plan that with the hats. Those simpatico.
Yeah, exactly. So real quick, you hear us use our famous little call sign out when we do this. Just a refresher. At my bachelor party, Rick and Mark Cook and I were the 3 last men standing. R.I.P. Cookie, we love you and miss you.
Yep.
And we were at the pub at International Plaza, and I went to the restroom, and you dipped out, my friend. It was about 1:00 in the morning, and you called it a night. And the funny thing is, I came downstairs and I asked Mark. I said, "Where's Rick?" He's like, "I don't know. I thought he went to the restroom with you." I'm like, "No, he didn't." And we're looking all over International Plaza for you because you had a couple of adult beverages that night.
I may have.
Yeah. And so we're calling you. You aren't picking up. We're wondering where the hell is Rick, and all this. And then I checked my email for some reason, and you had emailed me from a cab, and you just said out.
So, I've thought about that because I know we've discussed like why. And I went into the memory bank. So I have 2 phones. I have a work phone and a personal phone. My personal phone, which is the one that had your phone number in it, died.
Right.
my work phone I did have with me, and I didn't have your phone number in there, but you and I had emailed over my work email before. So I was like, well, I at least need to let him know. So I'm going to email him. So that's why that happened.
Good idea.
I thought it was the courteous thing to do.
But it wasn't even like, hey, Scott, we had fun tonight. You know, I had to call a cab and, you know, good night. I was just out. That's all.
Well, it's your bachelor party. I didn't want you to have to read through a diatribe of why I was leaving. It was just
exactly. Yeah. We pretty much got that. So, and listen, we always appreciate you and your insight. Real quick before you go, give us a pick in this game. What's your score?
So you and I talked, and I heard you bump this on your podcast the other day that I had taken the Bucs, and you were going to see if I changed my mind.
Yeah.
So after doing some additional film review, thinking about it. I am going Cowboys 27-19.
Okay, there you go. Giving the Bucs an extra point. I love that. From 18 to 19. All right. Well, we're going to have our picks on Pewter Reports as we do always on our Pewter preview and predictions.
Oh, see, that's not fair.
Yeah, I'm picking the Buccaneers. I don't want to score yet, but I'm picking Tampa at home. I cannot bet against Tom Brady, especially at home. So I'm going to let the cat out of the bag. I think the Bucs win. Matt, how about you?
I actually am picking the Bucs as well. I just think for 1 week it's going to click. I think you get a better performance from the offense, and the defense is able to make enough stops.
Well, wait. Hey, do you guys have do you guys have grass there? I might need to change my pick. Is it a
yes?
You guys
have
grass, right?
Yes. Yeah. Yep. Exactly. All right. Well, for Rick Zois, for Matt Matera, we appreciate all you Pewter people joining us. Make sure that you're following us on YouTube at Pewter Report TV. Make sure you subscribe and hit the like button on this podcast and all the other ones we do. We greatly appreciate it. It helps out. But we're going to have another show tomorrow. Let me just throw this little teaser up there. This is going to be, let me get rid of this graphic here. This is how the Bucs and Cowboys have changed since week 1. Well, Chris Godwin's got a lot better, that's for sure. And he was able to play against the Cowboys before getting hurt with the hamstring injury in week 1, but he's back now, catching touchdowns and playing better. So we shall see how that is going to pan out. But we'll talk about tomorrow, 4 o'clock Eastern, how the Bucs and the Cowboys have changed the season since week 1. For Rick Zois and Matt Matera, I'm Scott Reynolds saying we'll see you tomorrow on another edition of the Pewter Report